In this life, we are often swept away by the currents of emotion and external events. The world will challenge us, people will test us, and the unpredictability of fate will never cease. Yet the true measure of strength lies not in how the world treats us, but in how we choose to respond to it. As Stoics, we understand that the key to mastering life is not in the control of external circumstances, but in the mastery of our own minds. The art of not reacting is one of the most powerful tools we can wield in our journey towards inner peace. In this pursuit, we learn to control not what happens around us, but the responses that arise within us. To react is to surrender control to external forces. To respond with purpose is to assert control over oneself, and in doing so, we align ourselves with nature's wisdom. Today, we shall delve into the Stoic principles that allow us to train our minds, not to react in haste or impulse, but to respond with measured thought, discipline, and wisdom. Let us prepare ourselves to cultivate a tranquility that no outward storm can disturb. 1. Understanding the power of reaction. The first principle in our journey to train the mind not to react is to understand the immense power that our reactions hold. In every situation, we are presented with a choice, though often that choice is not immediately visible. The reaction is the instinctive response that arises within us, shaped by our experiences, emotions, and conditioned beliefs. It is the immediate, unfiltered expression of our inner state. And yet this reaction, as powerful as it may seem, is often the very source of our suffering and disquiet. To react is to surrender ourselves to the forces outside of us, to give up our inner sovereignty. It is as if we hand over the reins of our mind to the whims of circumstance. Whether it be a harsh word from another, an unexpected event, or a sudden change in our plans, the first impulse is often one of disturbance, an emotional surge that clouds our judgment and shakes our peace. In these moments, we are no longer the masters of our minds. Instead, we become slaves to our emotions. What we fail to recognize in such moments is that our reaction does not come from the external event itself, but from our perception of it. This is a crucial distinction. The Stoics teach us that we cannot control the events that occur in life, but we have absolute dominion over how we choose to interpret and respond to them. The event in and of itself is neutral. It is our judgment of the event that creates the storm within us. Take, for example, the experience of being insulted by someone. The natural reaction might be to retaliate, to feel wounded, to feel anger swell within. Yet upon deeper reflection, we must ask ourselves, why should we allow another person's words to disrupt our peace? Why should their opinion of us hold any weight in determining how we feel about ourselves? Their words are merely a reflection of their own perceptions, not a reflection of our worth. The insult, in its essence, is nothing more than a fleeting utterance. The real power lies in how we choose to meet it. In the moment of reaction, we are consumed by our emotions, our impulses, and our ingrained patterns of thought. We are at the mercy of the mind, which has not been trained to discern between what is necessary and what is not. But in the absence of reaction, there lies a great power, an inner peace that cannot be shaken by the storm of external events. The Stoic understands that the external world is beyond their control, and thus it is futile to invest energy into trying to alter it. It is not the world that needs to change, but our relationship with it. We must learn to separate ourselves from the tide of reactions, to stand firm in the stillness of our own minds. This requires a profound shift in perspective, one that acknowledges the impermanence of all things. Whatever happens to us, no matter how challenging or painful, is but a moment in the grand scheme of life. It is fleeting, temporary, and not worthy of our unchecked emotional response. The true mastery of the mind lies in recognizing the nature of our reactions and, through self-discipline, choosing not to succumb to them. It is only through the practice of mindful awareness that we can begin to detach ourselves from the habitual patterns of reaction. This is not an instantaneous transformation, but a gradual process, one that requires patience and persistence. It is a continuous effort to remain present, to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, and to pause before we act. The first step in training the mind to not react, therefore, is to understand the nature of the reaction itself. It is not a simple impulse, it is a manifestation of our beliefs, expectations, and attachments. To react is to give energy to that which is not in our control. But by learning to see the reaction for what it is, a momentary disturbance in the calm of our inner being, we begin to cultivate the strength to resist it. In moments of disturbance, instead of yielding to the instinctive surge, we must learn to pause. This pause is not a passive inaction, but a deliberate act of self-control. It is the recognition that we do not need to respond immediately, that we are not slaves to our impulses, and that our peace is more valuable than any fleeting emotion. To understand the power of reaction is to recognize that in every moment of reaction, we have the power to choose to either succumb to the emotional tide or to anchor ourselves in stillness and wisdom. The more we train our minds to recognize this power, the more we become the masters of our own inner world. And in this mastery, we find the key to true tranquility, a tranquility that is impervious to the chaos outside. In this way, the Stoic path is not one of passive acceptance or resignation, but one of active engagement with the mind. It is a commitment to mastering our internal landscape so that we may walk through the external world with calm, composure, and clarity. This is the essence of Stoic practice, the cultivation of an unshakable peace, regardless of what life may bring. 2. The nature of the mind and its responses. To begin our journey in training the mind not to react, we must first seek to understand the nature of the mind itself, for it is the mind that shapes every response, every reaction. The mind is a powerful force, capable of immense wisdom and clarity when cultivated properly, yet it is also susceptible to confusion, impulsivity, and turmoil when left unchecked. It is the source of both our greatest triumphs and our deepest sufferings, and as such it demands our utmost attention and discipline. The mind, as the Stoics teach us, is not an isolated entity, but rather a vessel that is constantly receiving and processing external impressions. These impressions come from the world around us through our senses, our thoughts, our beliefs, and our experiences. They are not inherently good or bad, they are simply stimuli. Yet it is our judgments about these stimuli that give rise to our responses. The moment we interpret an event, a person, or situation, we shape the way we feel about it, and consequently how we respond. At its core, the mind is a collection of patterns, habits of thought and behavior that we have developed over a lifetime. These patterns often operate automatically without our conscious awareness. When something triggers an emotional response, it is usually not the event itself that causes the reaction, but the thought patterns we have built around that event. If we have conditioned our minds to perceive a particular event as threatening, unjust, or upsetting, then our response will naturally be one of anxiety, anger, or frustration. This is the nature of the reactive mind. Consider how the mind responds when we face a challenge or obstacle. Often the first impulse is to perceive the challenge as something to avoid or to fight against. The mind immediately looks for a way to escape discomfort, to preserve the status quo, to avoid the unpleasant feeling that arises. We may lash out in frustration, shut down in fear, or become overwhelmed with worry. This response, however, is not rooted in wisdom or reason. It is rooted in instinct, the primal urge to avoid pain and seek pleasure. In this sense, the mind is much like an animal, acting out of survival and self-preservation. Yet, the Stoic path teaches us that we are not to be governed by these primal instincts. The human mind is capable of far more than mere reaction. It has the power of reflection, of reason, and of conscious choice. It is in the cultivation of these higher faculties that we can learn to control our responses and move from automatic reactivity to mindful action. This is the essence of Stoic practice, to understand that our initial impulse is not always the truth, and that we are not bound to act on it. To train the mind not to react, we must first become aware of these automatic thought patterns. This requires a level of self-awareness that is not easily attained. It requires us to observe our thoughts and emotions with the same clarity and objectivity that a wise observer might use when watching a storm pass through the sky. We must learn to separate ourselves from the thoughts and feelings that arise, recognizing that they do not define us. They are simply transient movements in the mind, fleeting and impermanent. The Stoics teach us that the key to mastering the mind lies in our ability to question our judgments. Whenever a reaction arises, we must pause and ask ourselves, is this judgment rooted in reality, or is it merely a product of my own beliefs and assumptions? The more we practice this, the more we begin to see that much of our suffering is self-imposed, the result of judgments that are not aligned with the true nature of things. One of the most powerful tools in training the mind is the practice of mindfulness and active, deliberate awareness of the present moment. When we are mindful, we observe the mind's responses without judgment, without attaching ourselves to them. This allows us to see the mind's habitual reactions and, over time, to detach ourselves from them. The more we observe, the more we become aware of how quickly the mind jumps to conclusions, how swiftly it builds stories around simple events, and how easily it becomes tangled in the web of emotion. Consider an everyday scenario. You are faced with a disagreement with a friend. Immediately, your mind may begin to spiral. Thoughts of anger, hurt, or even defensiveness may arise. These reactions are automatic, but they are not necessarily the truth of the situation. If we allow the mind to continue unchecked, we may find ourselves saying things we don't mean, or worse, damaging the relationship altogether. However, if we pause and practice mindfulness, we can separate the emotions from the facts and respond with clarity and composure. In moments of disturbance, the Stoic does not seek to suppress or deny their emotions, but rather to understand them. The goal is not to erase the emotional response, but to recognize it for what it is, a temporary, fleeting impulse. The mind may tell you that you must react in anger, but the Stoic recognizes that this impulse is not the only option. There is always a space between the stimulus and the response, and it is in this space that we find our true power. This space, this moment of pause, is where we can choose a different path. Instead of reacting out of habit, we can choose to respond with wisdom and self-control. The Stoic does not act impulsively, but with deliberate intention. By questioning our judgments and observing our reactions, we begin to cultivate a mind that is not at the mercy of its instincts, but one that is governed by reason and virtue. The mind in its nature is malleable. It is not fixed, but rather capable of change and growth. Just as the body grows stronger through exercise, the mind grows stronger through the exercise of self-awareness, reflection, and mindful discipline. Over time, the more we practice this approach, the less power our automatic reactions will hold over us. Instead of being slaves to our impulses, we become masters of our own mental landscape. In this way, the Stoic path is one of continual self-improvement. It is a process of understanding the mind's nature, questioning its automatic judgments, and training it to respond with wisdom. As we cultivate this discipline, we become less susceptible to the storms of life, more resilient in the face of adversity, and more capable of maintaining our peace, no matter what may come. This is the true power of the Stoic mind, the ability to remain steadfast, clear, and unshaken, no matter the external circumstances. 3. The first step, mastering self-awareness. The journey to training the mind not to react begins with a crucial first step, mastering self-awareness. To truly understand how the mind operates, we must first become intimately acquainted with ourselves. It is not enough to simply wish for peace or self-mastery. We must actively engage in the practice of observing our own thoughts, emotions, and impulses. Self-awareness is the foundation upon which all other Stoic practices are built, for without it we cannot recognize the automatic reactions that rule our lives. Without awareness, we are mere passengers in our own minds, carried along by the currents of unconscious thought and emotion. The Stoic does not live in ignorance of the workings of the mind. Rather, they commit to observing and understanding themselves with honesty and clarity. To know oneself is to become aware of the patterns of thinking that govern us, the beliefs that shape our judgments, and the impulses that drive our actions. This knowledge is not the result of idle reflection or detached contemplation. It is an active, disciplined practice. It is the art of watching the mind, of being present with every thought and feeling that arises, and of examining them without judgment or attachment. In every moment, the mind is in a constant state of flux. Thoughts come and go, emotions rise and fall, desires and fears ebb and flow. Yet most of us go through life unaware of the force that these mental currents have over us. We are swept away by them, reacting to the world as it comes, often without ever pausing to question the validity of our responses. This is where self-awareness becomes crucial. When we learn to observe the mind, we begin to see how much of our experience is shaped by unconscious patterns and automatic reactions. We begin to see how much of our emotional turmoil is created not by the events themselves, but by the judgments and interpretations we attach to them. The first task, then, is to observe. This is not a passive exercise. It is an active engagement with our thoughts, as if we were watching a river flow by. Instead of being caught up in the current, we step back and observe the water from the shore. When a thought arises, we do not immediately act upon it. We do not judge it or resist it. We simply notice it. We recognize it for what it is, a transient movement in the mind. Similarly, when an emotion arises, whether it is anger, fear, or sadness, we do not immediately surrender to it. We acknowledge it, but we do not let it define us. In this way, we begin to detach ourselves from the automatic responses that usually dictate our behavior. Self-awareness is not just about observing our thoughts and emotions in the moment. It is also about understanding the deeper beliefs and values that shape those thoughts and emotions. The Stoic understands that all thoughts are rooted in judgments. When we experience anger, it is not because of the event itself, but because we have judged the event as unjust or wrong. When we feel anxiety, it is because we have judged the future as uncertain and threatening. To master self-awareness is to recognize these judgments and question their validity. This practice of questioning is a key element of Stoic philosophy. It is not enough to simply observe, we must also examine. Why do I feel this way? Is this judgment based on reason, or is it the product of an ingrained belief or fear? The Stoics believed that many of our mental and emotional struggles are the result of false judgments, beliefs that are not aligned with nature or reality. These false judgments cloud our perception, distorting our experience of the world and leading us to react in ways that are unnecessary and harmful. By becoming aware of these judgments, we can begin to challenge them and replace them with more rational, virtuous perspectives. The Stoic exercise of journaling is one powerful tool for developing self-awareness. By writing down our thoughts and emotions on paper, we gain a clearer view of the mental patterns that dominate our minds. We can examine our reactions to specific situations and explore the beliefs that underpin them. This practice allows us to see our mental habits more clearly and to identify areas where we may be reacting impulsively or irrationally. Through this process of self-reflection, we begin to understand ourselves better, and in doing so, we gain more control over our thoughts and responses. Another crucial aspect of self-awareness is recognizing the impermanence of all things. Much of our emotional reactivity arises from the attachment we have to particular outcomes or situations. We attach ourselves to the belief that things should go a certain way, that we should be treated a certain way, or that life should unfold according to our desires. When life does not meet these expectations, we react with frustration, anger, or disappointment. But when we cultivate the awareness that everything in life is temporary and subject to change, we begin to loosen our attachment to specific outcomes. We begin to understand that nothing is truly permanent and that our peace is not dependent on external circumstances. Self-awareness also requires a deep understanding of the nature of the self. In the hustle and bustle of daily life, we often identify ourselves with our roles, our achievements, or our possessions. We identify ourselves with our job, our relationships, our successes, and even our failures. But the Stoic teaches us that these external identifiers are not who we truly are. The true self, the essence of who we are, lies within a mind capable of reason, virtue, and tranquility. When we identify with the external, we become vulnerable to external events. When we identify with the internal, we find peace regardless of the circumstances. This is the path of the Stoic, an active, intentional practice of self-awareness that leads us to deeper understanding, self-mastery, and ultimately inner peace. It is a path that requires discipline and commitment, but it is the foundation upon which all other Stoic practices are built. Without self-awareness, we are at the mercy of our impulses, reactions, and attachments. But with self-awareness, we gain the ability to observe, question, and ultimately choose our responses, no matter what the world may bring. In this first step of mastering self-awareness, we begin to separate ourselves from the mind's automatic reactions. We begin to recognize that we are not our thoughts or emotions. We are the observer, the one who can choose how to respond. This realization is liberating, for it means that we are no longer slaves to our internal states. Instead, we become masters of our own minds, capable of responding with reason, virtue, and wisdom. And in doing so, we cultivate the inner peace that no external event can disturb. 4. Accepting what is beyond your control. In the pursuit of tranquility and mastery over our reactions, we must come to terms with one of the most fundamental principles of Stoic philosophy, the acceptance of what is beyond our control. To react is to resist the natural flow of life, to push against the current of events, circumstances, and other people's actions that we cannot alter. The Stoic wisdom, however, teaches us to focus on that which we can control, our own thoughts, judgments, and responses, and to let go of the desire to control anything beyond that. The truth is simple yet profound: there is so much in this life over which we have no influence. The behavior of others, the changing of seasons, the rise and fall of nations, the inevitable march of time, and the unpredictable events that befall us are all beyond our control. To expend our mental and emotional energy on trying to change or resist these things is to waste our life force. And yet, it is human nature to desire control over every aspect of our existence. We wish to dictate outcomes, shape the world to our liking, and mold others to meet our expectations. But in this striving for control, we fail to recognize that peace comes not from bending the world to our will, but from accepting the world as it is. The Stoic accepts the reality of life's unpredictability, its inherent uncertainty, and its frequent unfairness. Rather than becoming upset or distressed by what is outside of their influence, the Stoic embraces the wisdom of understanding what can be controlled. The Stoic asks themselves, what is truly within my power? The answer is clear: it is not the external world, nor the actions of others, but our own thoughts, desires, and responses. This is the realm in which we can exercise true sovereignty. Consider, for example, the inevitability of death. No one can escape it. It is not a matter of if, but when. And yet, so many live their lives in fear of death, resisting its certainty, fighting against it with all their might. But the Stoic does not fear death. Instead, they accept it as a natural part of life. They understand that death, like all things in nature, is beyond their control. They cannot prevent it, delay it, or alter its course. What they can do is choose how they approach it. They can accept it with equanimity, viewing it not as something to fear, but as a part of the greater cycle of existence. Similarly, in our daily lives, we are often confronted with events that stir up strong emotions, unexpected setbacks, the actions of others that we find unjust or irritating, challenges that seem insurmountable. The instinctive reaction is to resist, to fight back, to complain, or to become frustrated. But the Stoic teaches us that these reactions are futile. They do not change the event or the situation, they only disturb our inner peace. To fight against what we cannot control is to battle with the very nature of existence. The essence of acceptance is not resignation. It is not to passively submit to life's challenges with indifference. Rather, it is the active choice to focus on what is in our power, the way we perceive and respond to the world. This shift in focus requires immense discipline and clarity of mind. It demands that we consistently remind ourselves that external events are neither good nor bad in themselves, but only insofar as we judge them to be so. The Stoic does not look at life through a lens of entitlement or expectation, but through a lens of understanding and acceptance. This practice of accepting what is beyond our control does not mean that we abandon our goals or our desires. We are not to become passive observers of life. We still strive for excellence, still take action, still work toward improving ourselves and our circumstances. But we do so with the understanding that the outcome is not always within our grasp. Success, failure, happiness, and sorrow, these are the fluctuations of life that are beyond our complete control. The only true control we have is over how we choose to face them. When faced with a difficult situation, the Stoic pauses and asks, "What is in my power here? Is it my control over the weather, over another person's opinion, or over an unfortunate turn of events? No. What I control is my mind, my response, and my attitude. I control how I interpret the situation, how I choose to act in the face of it, and what I choose to learn from it." The Stoic seeks to take responsibility not for the external outcomes, but for their own internal state. They understand that external circumstances do not have the power to shake their inner peace unless they allow them to. Let us consider the example of a misfortune, such as losing a job. The loss itself is an event that is beyond our control, but how we respond to the loss is entirely within our grasp. We may react with anger, self-pity, or fear of the future, or we may choose to see this as an opportunity for growth, a challenge to be met with resilience, or a chance to reassess our path. The Stoic response is one of understanding and acceptance, recognizing that while the loss is outside of our control, our response is not. By accepting the situation as it is, without judgment or resistance, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering and open ourselves to finding the wisdom within the adversity. To accept what is beyond our control also means to let go of our attachments to outcomes, to people, to things. When we become overly attached to a particular outcome, we set ourselves up for disappointment and suffering. The Stoic understands that attachment to the external world is the source of much pain, for the external world is ever-changing, unpredictable, and uncontrollable. True peace, the Stoic knows, comes from within, from a mind that is free from attachments and expectations. When we release our attachments to things beyond our control, we free ourselves from the constant pull of desire and frustration. We come to understand that the only true source of happiness is within, in the cultivation of virtues like wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These are the things that cannot be taken away from us. They are the steady, unchanging foundation upon which we can build a life of tranquility, regardless of what happens outside of us. Acceptance does not mean that we give up on striving for improvement or that we abandon our goals. It simply means that we free ourselves from the burden of trying to control what is beyond our reach. It means that we focus on what we can change: our thoughts, our actions, our responses, and we leave the rest to unfold according to nature's course. The Stoic recognizes that life is filled with unpredictability, and that to resist the flow of life is to resist nature itself. By accepting what is beyond our control, we align ourselves with the natural order, and in doing so we find peace. For peace is not the absence of challenges or difficulties, but the ability to meet them with acceptance, wisdom, and serenity. 5. Cultivating the power of choice in every moment. The path to mastering the mind's reactions is not solely about acceptance, but also about the active cultivation of one of the most profound gifts we possess: the power of choice. This power is the defining characteristic of what it means to be human. While the external world may present us with countless stimuli, challenges, and circumstances, It is our ability to choose how we respond to them that defines our character and shapes our experience. The Stoic, in particular, recognizes that while they cannot always control what happens to them, they always have control over how they respond. This is the foundation of their tranquility and resilience, the unshakable conviction that they are the masters of their own internal world. We often speak of choices in the context of decisions, choosing one path over another, selecting an action or a course of behavior. However, the Stoic understanding of choice goes much deeper, for the Stoic choice is not limited to the external act, but encompasses the inner realm of thought, emotion, and judgment. Every moment presents us with an opportunity to choose not just what we will do, but how we will think and feel in response to what happens around us. To be a Stoic is to exercise conscious, deliberate choice in every circumstance, large or small. It is to act in alignment with reason, virtue, and wisdom, regardless of the impulses that may arise within us. This is the first realization we must come to, that our thoughts, emotions, and reactions are not predetermined, nor are they outside of our control. We are not passive recipients of the world's events, helpless to their influence. Rather, we are active participants in the creation of our experience. When faced with an insult, we have a choice whether to react with anger or to respond with calm. When confronted with difficulty, we have a choice whether to surrender to despair or to embrace the challenge with fortitude. The Stoic is not a slave to their emotions, they are a master of their inner world, and they understand that this mastery begins with the recognition of choice. The essence of choice lies in our capacity for judgment. What we choose to focus on, what we choose to value, and what we choose to give meaning to, these all acts of judgment. The world does not impose meaning upon us, we impose meaning upon the world. We decide what is worthy of our attention, what is worth our emotional investment, and what is worthy of our peace. It is in this domain that the power of choice is exercised most profoundly. Consider a situation where you are confronted with a criticism from a colleague or a friend. The instinctual reaction might be to feel defensive, to become offended, or to retaliate. However, this reaction is not dictated by the situation itself. It is shaped by the judgment we make about the situation. We may judge the criticism as an attack on our character, as an unfair judgment of our worth. This judgment leads us to react with anger, frustration, or self-defense. But what if instead we chose to see the criticism as an opportunity for growth, as a chance to examine ourselves honestly and objectively? What if we chose to take it not as an insult, but as a valuable perspective that could help us improve? This shift in judgment is the exercise of the power of choice, and it changes everything. The Stoic understands that it is not the event itself that causes distress, but the way in which we judge it. The power to choose how we interpret and respond to the world lies entirely in our hands. By exercising this power consciously, we free ourselves from the tyranny of automatic reactions. We are no longer ruled by our impulses, our desires, or our fears. Instead, we act according to our highest values, those of wisdom, virtue, and integrity. This power of choice extends not only to our thoughts and emotions, but also to our actions. Every moment is an opportunity to choose how we will act in accordance with our principles. The Stoic does not wait for the perfect circumstances to act virtuously. They choose to act rightly, regardless of the challenges or distractions that may arise. They understand that their character is shaped by their choices, and that every choice, no matter how small, contributes to the cultivation of their virtues. One of the most powerful aspects of this Stoic choice is the recognition that we are always at choice, even in the most difficult and challenging circumstances. When facing hardship, the Stoic does not fall into despair or passivity. Instead, they ask themselves, what can I do in this moment? How can I respond in a way that is consistent with my highest values? In the face of loss, they choose to accept the reality with equanimity, understanding that their response to the loss is their responsibility. In the face of adversity, they choose to act with courage and resolve, knowing that their strength comes not from avoiding difficulty, but from embracing it with wisdom and grace. At the heart of this practice lies the Stoic idea of living according to nature. This does not mean passively accepting whatever comes our way, but rather responding to life's events in alignment with our rational nature. The Stoic seeks to cultivate an inner state of harmony where their thoughts, emotions, and actions are all in accord with reason. This requires constant vigilance, for it is easy to be swept away by the forces of habit, impulse, and emotion. But the Stoic understands that every moment is an opportunity to return to their center, to exercise choice, and to act in a way that reflects their highest self. The power of choice is also connected to the Stoic practice of mental discipline. We must train the mind to recognize when we are being driven by unconscious impulses, when we are being swept away by emotional reactions, or when we are giving into irrational judgment. By practicing mindfulness and self-awareness, we strengthen our ability to exercise choice in the moment. The more we train our minds, the more automatic our wise choices become. Eventually, the Stoics' responses to life's challenges are no longer a struggle, but a natural expression of their character and virtue. This cultivation of the power of choice does not mean that we will always make the right decision, nor does it mean that we will never experience negative emotions or reactions. It simply means that, over time, we develop the ability to choose our responses with wisdom, to redirect our thoughts with reason, and to act in accordance with virtue, regardless of the circumstances. The Stoic understands that perfection is not the goal, but progress, continually making better choices, refining our character, and growing closer to the ideal of wisdom and virtue. Ultimately, the power of choice is a gift that empowers us to live a life of freedom. The Stoic is not bound by the whims of fortune, by the opinions of others, or by the forces of circumstance. They are free because they have mastered the one thing that no one can take from them: their ability to choose how they will respond to the world. This freedom is the foundation of peace, for it is only when we recognize the power of choice that we can truly live in alignment with our true nature, unshaken by the external events that might otherwise disturb us. In this way, the Stoic path is one of continual choice, a choice to live with wisdom, a choice to respond with virtue, and a choice to cultivate inner peace, no matter what the world may bring. Each moment is an opportunity to strengthen this power of choice, to live with intention and purpose, and to shape our character in alignment with the highest good. By embracing this power, we become the architects of our own destiny, and in doing so, we create a life of true freedom and tranquility. 6. Transforming obstacles into opportunities. One of the core tenets of Stoic philosophy is the idea that obstacles are not barriers to our success or well-being, but opportunities for growth and development. Life, by its nature, presents us with difficulties, unpredictable events, challenges, setbacks, and hardships that we cannot avoid. These are the constant companions of the human experience. The Stoic, however, does not see these obstacles as misfortunes or reasons for despair. Instead, they recognize that these very challenges are what shape our character, deepen our wisdom, and refine our virtues. The Stoic does not waste energy lamenting the fact that life is difficult. They do not seek to avoid adversity or to live in a world free of obstacles. Instead, they view every difficulty as an opportunity to practice virtue. It is easy to be calm and patient when life is smooth, when all is in order, and when everything aligns with our desires. But it is in the face of adversity that true character is revealed. The Stoic knows that it is not in moments of comfort and ease that we grow, but in moments of challenge and hardship. The first step in transforming obstacles into opportunities is to change our perception of them. We must stop seeing obstacles as threats, as things to be feared or avoided, and begin to see them as stepping stones to greater wisdom, resilience, and inner strength. When we face an obstacle, the Stoic asks, "What can I learn from this? How can this experience help me grow? What virtue can I practice in response to this challenge?" For instance, when faced with an illness, the Stoic does not lament the misfortune of being sick. Instead, they use the opportunity to practice the virtue of temperance, taking care of their body, resting when needed, and cultivating gratitude for the health they have, even in times of difficulty. Illness, as an obstacle, becomes a way to strengthen their character and deepen their understanding of the fragility of life. Similarly, when faced with a failure, the Stoic does not see it as a permanent defeat, but as an opportunity to learn. Failure, in their eyes, is not the end of the road, but a valuable lesson on the path to success. They reflect on what went wrong, what could have been done differently, and what virtues they can develop as a result, whether it is patience, perseverance, humility, or self-discipline. The Stoic understands that failure is not a mark of inadequacy, but a necessary part of growth. Every failure is a chance to improve, to refine our strategies, and to build resilience. One of the most powerful aspects of Stoic philosophy is the concept of amor fati, or the love of fate. This is the practice of embracing whatever happens to us, good or bad, as something that is part of the natural order of the universe. Instead of resisting or fighting against the difficulties of life, we embrace them with gratitude, understanding that they are opportunities for growth. The Stoic does not wish to avoid hardship. They see it as an essential part of life's journey. Every obstacle, every challenge, is a chance to exercise virtue and to live in accordance with nature. When we encounter an obstacle, we are given a choice. We can resist it, complain about it, or allow it to disrupt our peace. Alternatively, we can choose to accept it, learn from it, and find meaning in it. The Stoic embraces the second option. They understand that every challenge is a chance to practice one of the four cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Wisdom comes when we reflect on the obstacle and seek to understand it. Courage is found when we face the challenge head-on, despite our fear or discomfort. Justice is exercised when we act fairly and with integrity in the midst of adversity. Temperance is practiced when we maintain control over our desires and emotions, refusing to let the obstacle dictate our peace of mind. The Stoic also recognizes that obstacles often reveal the fragility of our attachments. We may become attached to a certain outcome, to a particular idea of how life should unfold, and when things do not go according to plan, we experience frustration or disappointment. But the Stoic teaches us to let go of these attachments and to accept that life will not always unfold as we wish. By doing so, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering and become more resilient in the face of adversity. Consider a financial setback, for example. It is easy to become upset, to worry, or to become angry at the injustice of the situation. But the Stoic, instead of reacting with distress, takes a step back and asks, what can I learn from this? How can I adjust my behavior to avoid this in the future? What is within my control in this situation, and what is beyond it? By focusing on what they can control, their own actions, their response, and their mindset, the Stoic transforms a potential crisis into an opportunity for growth.